This congregation has had a wonderful time in mission, so I thought that to be able to see some of what you do would be really helpful and important, because a number of people from this congregation headed off to Kenya this summer. Next summer, a number of our youth and a few adults will head to Jamaica. It's not only the mission and ministry that happens here, whether it's through backpacks or taking things to Cameron or housing homeless families through rain in our building, but there's some things that have happened a long ways away and we don't get to see them or know what's happening. Actually, much of our international mission got started with Ted Pollock. On March the 25th, 2008, our ministry in Kenya began when Martin Shikuku wrote Beverly Reeve, because in 1978, Ted and his wife Dolly had taken care of Martin. The letter expressed sadness over the passing of Ted and Dolly. Ted passed away at the age of 94. At the age of 91, Ted and I poured ring beam on a roof of a building in Mozambique, and he was on the top of the roof at age 91. Martin wrote Ted through Beverly, saying that he and Ruth now operated an orphanage in Soy, Kenya, and that the buildings were just too small. The first discussion took place about a mission trip from First Presbyterian Church to Mozambique in 2008. Undertaking the project meant that this was going to be a larger project than any of us had done before. It was going to be much bigger in terms of buildings and more than double the cost of anything we had ever done internationally before. And so a small group of us were commissioned right here in the chancel to head off to Kenya. We would talk about the trip in Fellowship Hall and what we were planning to do, even build a mock-up of the dormitories we were hoping to build. And then the great day came, and we headed off to Kitale, Kenya. We arrived at the international airport in Kitale. This is it. They have one screening machine there, and you kind of sometimes walk around it rather than through it, and they kind of ask you questions like, you don't have any bombs in the suitcases, do you? And you say no. And we loaded what we had brought in the back of a pickup truck, and we headed to Kitale. First, before we got to Kitale, though, we had to find the orphanage in Soy, and so we went there. 43 children were in this orphanage, and we got a good look at their buildings and the people who were at the orphanage in Soy, where Martin and Ruth were kind of the parents. Yeah. Next one, I guess. There was a young man there who went with us. You see him in the gold shirt. That is Todd Peterson. He is a member of our congregation, and Todd went on that trip and got to know Ruth and part of Ruth and Martin's family, while others of us arrived a little after Todd had been to Kenya, and we began to work on the buildings, beginning by building the roof first, and then brick walls exteriorly and interiorly after that. So the building began to take shape. While we were doing the construction on these dormitory buildings, some neighbors went to Soy, which had 7 small houses with all 43 children in them, destroyed and burnt the buildings with the children in them. All of the children managed to survive, but they had no place to live. And so we brought them an hour and a half south down to where we were outside of Kitale, and they lived with us as we worked and did construction on their dorm. We named the project Johabeto, which stands for Joining Hands for a Better Tomorrow. and the building began to rise. You see the concrete at the top of the bricks? That's what we call ring beam. That's how it kind of supports part of the roof. And here is Martin. He is there with a borrowed motorcycle, the only vehicle that the orphanage had. And that's his daughter in the blue. She had a degree in theater from the University of Nairobi. Every day, from the area in Soy until the whole family moved south with the children, Ruth would get on the back of that motorcycle and she would carry pots and pans and food on the back of the motorcycle to feed our work crew. She would ride an hour and a half down. She would walk 3 miles in from the main road to where we were working, and then she would cook lunch for us. She would clean the pots and pans, get back on the motorcycle, and ride all the way back to Soy. The project began to take shape, and even the children who came from Soy to Kitale began to help us work on the project. Here's a man that some of you know, right? This is Lucian Rouse, Dr. Lucian Rouse. If you know anything about Lucian, he does surgery on knees, right? He's professor of sports medicine at the University of Rochester Medical Center, but you never knew that he was also a bricklayer. We would work from the moment the sun would rise until the sun would set. And on the last day that we were there, Lucian literally fell asleep while holding up one of the bricks. He was that tired. At the end of a large workday, though, we did take showers, in case you think we didn't. This is a typical shower head in Kenya. It's a shower head through which there's an electric wire and current passes. This is a little dangerous to think about, actually. That you've got a wire of electricity with 220 going through a shower head, and that's going to heat. Well, it doesn't really give you a hot shower. It just kind of takes some of the chill off, right? You know, which is a way in which you bathe in Kenya. There are some people that you'll recognize, like Matt Wall, who runs Forsyth Jewelers. There's Adam Pollock greeting Martin and Ruth's son. And we were so delighted when the project kind of drew to a close. We had something else that happened, and it occurred at Macy's department store. I went to buy a tie. I'm wearing the tie that I bought today at Macy's, at the men's department. And there is a man who works there. He is from Uganda, and he is fairly short. His name is Charles Boak. He still works there from time to time and walks with a bit of a limp. Charles Boak would build corn grinders that he would ship to Africa in his garage in Webster. So I got to talking with him, and I said, you know, we could really use one of those at the orphanage in Kitale that we've been working on. So we went to his garage, and he would make these things with the hopper out of corrugated metal. I said, I'm afraid that things would flake off and then the children would become ill. Could we make it out of stainless? He said, never did that before, but let's give it a try. And then he handmade all of the blades and the screenings that would cut and grind the corn. And then we needed an engine for it, so we decided on a diesel engine from Japan, because with diesel fuel, there would be less likely of a fire if you had corn dust in the air. And then this unit was kind of lightly crated and sat in our fellowship hall for a while, and Dave and Sam Testa got, I don't know how long it sit there, about 2 months, I think. And finally, it got shipped all the way to Nairobi, and then from Nairobi out to Kitale, where it has been in continuous use since. The idea being that they could grind the corn that they had growing around them, could feed the children at the orphanage, and also grind their neighbor's corn, which would then give them a source of some income to maintain the orphanage. The buildings were somewhat completed. We built 2 dorms and a classroom and kitchen area. But the real reason for going, we learned after we had done this, was not just because we wanted to build buildings, but because we wanted to build lives and our lives were connected with those of the children in Kenya, particularly at these orphanages. Some people didn't have construction skills. Beverly here, this is Beverly Pollock, she thought she'd never travel to a place like this, and she said, I don't have construction skills or the kind of strength to do the work, but I could take care of the children. Eventually, we would go to Instep, where there are 152 children, 70 of which need to be diapered. When I arrived there, I encountered Bonnie. Bonnie was my charge. I took care of Bonnie every night, would put diapers on Bonnie and bathe her. Bonnie's mother, who was a single mom, did not want her. And she threw Bonnie into a pit latrine. A 13-year-old boy heard Bonnie crying. He climbed down into the feces and the urine, and he pulled Bonnie out. She had ingested what was in that latrine and was very sick, and the hospital in Kitale thought she wouldn't make it. But she survived the first few days, was brought to Instep Orphanage, and at that point, we were trying to do the best we could to both feed her and take care of her. When I went back this summer, I was so delighted to be able to pick up and hold Bonnie again. She looks like this. Sometimes the girls only hang with the girls and the boys only hang with the boys, and sometimes they do talk to each other. It's like this one couple, this boy and this, they look like almost they're a married couple in this picture, doesn't it? Don't you wonder what they're really saying to each other? It's the children that are important. And so the project happened at Joe Habeto until it was complete, and there was wonderful celebration, and at the celebration, Adam Pollock was there, and it's the first and only time I have ever seen Adam Pollock dance. And he danced with Ruth Shikuku. And what a joy it was this summer to see Martin and Ruth again. Only problem is the state of Kenya had decided that it needed the land on which the orphanage had been built. And they gave Martin and Ruth 90 days to find a place for all of the children and to tear the orphanage buildings down so that they could put high-tension power lines across the land. Martin called all the friends he knew in Kenya, and in 90 days, those buildings were torn down and new buildings constructed. It was a miracle. When Joe Habeto was done, we had a call for new help at Instep, and when we got there, there were a lot of children in 2012. So many we didn't quite know how to begin the project, but we did. We were going to build a dormitory where the exterior walls were made of stone and the interior walls were made of brick. Now, I'm not a very good bricklayer. I want you to know that. But one of the things I learned along the way, particularly when I was in flight, was that the men who built the Taj Mahal in India, that building so wonderfully prized, people in India didn't want another building ever to be built like that to match it, so they cut the hands off of the builders of the Taj Mahal. They looked at my masonry and said, Bruce, I'm looking at your wall here. If I were you, I'd be worried about my hands. This is Dave Jenks, who has been one of our deacons, and he's working on the wall, interior walls. You don't build the walls like we do, you know, we put wood studs in, some drywall. What would happen with the wood? The termites would eat it, right? And we used to have termite eating contests. OSHA would not be too impressed with us, by the way. This was the kind of scaffolding we used. It's not the world's greatest scaffolding, but you use what you've got. Some outside were in the construction of other latrines for the children and even dug several holes, the idea and hope being that we would cover them and then use the methane gas that was trapped and collected to light some of the lamps between the buildings. You can't go to the hardware store and get what you need, so all of the steel and rebar had to be cut with a hacksaw by hand, and all of the corners wired before we made boxes and filled them with concrete. The kitchen work, all of the food cooked for us was done on a wood stove outside. On Monday, we usually had rice and beans. On Tuesday, we had rice and beans. Wednesday was rice and beans. Thursday was about the same. One of the things that I can say, they were very contemporary in that they had a solar clothes dryer. And here's Matt Wall. You know, on the one hand, Matt Wall would know what to do with setting of jewelry. You know, he runs Forsyth Jewelers, but he also knows how to do masonry work. There was a classroom there, which is now a work shed, and our work progressed on the dormitory. We put in the windows and started to build the second floor. We build like you are not used to. You don't call up and say, "I'd like to have 42 yards of concrete for the floor." No. You carry bags of cement, you break gravel, and you mix sand, and you mix what you need with water that you carry in buckets on the ground, and mix your concrete that way and spread it. The building that provides most of the oversight of the programming life for the orphanage is this one. It was already constructed when we arrived. This is called the veranda. This is where the children eat. And also under construction in 2012, which some of us worked on this a little bit, was the medical clinic, which houses clinics on the first floor and kind of a dormitory of like for medical staff from wherever in the world who will go and work with the children. Here's some of our tools. That's our cement mixer. So this meant that in 2014, we needed to build a new dorm. That was this summer. I thought you'd like to take a look and see what the dorm looks like that we built in 2012. The building is stone on the outside, it's brick on the inside, and the boys take good care of it. Here's the inside of a couple of the dorm rooms. This is a boys' dorm. Those boys live in bunks that are 3 bunks high. They take care of all of their own clothes. They wash them by hand and fold them and press them and store everything neatly at the bottom of their bunks. And the girls do similarly in the main lodge. Here's a kind of like all of the children. There's a lot of them. But you really get to see them up close. And their smiles are absolutely wonderful. That's Elizabeth in the center. I thought you might like to take a good picture of, that's Rahima on the left, and here's Rebecca. I like Rebecca's smile. Do you remember the boy who in 2010 went with us first to Kitale and Johabedo? He's in the yellow shirt. That's Todd Peterson. Well, Todd Peterson graduated, and he now attends University of Buffalo Dental School. So what did he do this summer? We put together kind of a dental operatory that had happened before I arrived. It's not the most complete, but it's there. And he worked on the teeth of the children and the adults. Probably no student at UB did as much dental work interning as Todd Peterson did this summer in Kenya. And how do you take care of the kids' teeth now? Toothbrushes. Lots of toothbrushes. Others had other tasks to do. They were working on the columns for the new dorm. There were mother and daughter teams. There were others who were there, right, Paige? See some familiar sights, don't you? Again, the columns built the same way, making bricks by hand. Here's a picture of a chemist. That's Dan Harrison. Dan, you're a chemist by trade, really, right? But you also know how to sit on the floor and make paper airplanes and read books to children, which is important in building lives, as important as it is to build buildings. And do you remember we had Julia here? She was commissioned from this chancel to go and be a nurse. That's Julia, taking care of the children. She has so much medical work to do with all of those children. Remember, they have a lot of special needs. And she does that from not only the main dormitory room, but also from the medical clinic. Other people like to try different things for breakfast. Most of us decided our breakfast should be simple. Then there were the children. Now, on the picture on the left, the one wearing the hat is Jackson. And Ted Pollock gave that hat years ago to one of our people, and he gave the hat to Jackson. And when I got there, Jackson was still wearing the hat, even though it was quite warm outside. The boy in the middle, his name is Joshua. And when you speak in Swahili, the word for dad is baba. And the word for grandfather, by the way, is babu. But dad is baba. But when you use the word baba, if the dad has children and there are any male children, the name is added of the oldest male child. So since I have a son who is our oldest child and his name is Joshua, my name was Baba Joshua. Joshua never had a Baba Joshua. So when he heard that that was my name, he was so delighted. For the first time in his life, there was a Baba. I could not do anything without Joshua hanging on to me. He's there with Victor, the dog. Victor's a pretty good-sized animal. There's all of these children to feed, and there is something special about the food, and we'll get to that in a minute, and laundry to do. There were times when their ceilings were coming down. We had one room in which there are 70 cribs, and there was a ceiling that had one time been there, but it had fallen down, and that permits all kinds of vermin to come in. So we had to figure out how to put the ceiling back, which a number of us worked on, and there were those kind of tasks to do rather than complete the new dorm. The dorm, the new one, had gotten along this far. The columns had been made by the teams that were there, and the brick makers were still actively making bricks, all the bricks made on site by hand, fired in a kiln. Actually, the children grow their own food. Most of it is grown at the orphanage. And there is now an orphan school. We worked on classrooms while we were there, and as we sit here today, another classroom is being added to this school at Instep. Actually, it's a better picture when you show the kids outside the school. Ruth helped me do my laundry, and so I got to know Ruth pretty well, and Ruth and I did laundry together. The other boys were collecting firewood. The boys themselves, over by the dorm, had to remember do their own laundry by hand, and you go catch the water, and then you mix with the soap and rinse, and you didn't have a washing machine or a drying machine, but you took good care of everything. And then it was time to help everybody be fed. One of my favorite times was birthdays. They celebrate birthdays once per month at Instep Orphanage. And so, since I have a birthday in August, they celebrated mine along with the rest of the children. They announce your name and then your age. There were gasps when they heard my age. There was the oldest one there. And then all of those who had birthdays were called to the front, and they got their birthday gift. The birthday gift Well, this was a special day because this was the only time, once a month, the children got cake and ice cream. The birthday gift was this. You received the honor, since it was your birthday, to feed all the rest of the children cake and ice cream. If there was any left over, you got some. Your gift was the opportunity to serve. Now you know, when I hear junior highs and senior highs say to me, I am so bored, how I feel. Ron Pollock worked in the shop where most all the tools we carried in, and God provided our team Vince. Vince helped us sort medical equipment. He used to buy and sell medical equipment, so it was just a wonderful joy to have Vince along. There were several teams. There was one that went earlier, then there was a small one of us that went later, all feeling called by God from this congregation to serve these children. We have a backpack ministry here, right? But did you know we have a backpack ministry there too? We left our backpacks. And this is one of the ones we left for the children at Instep. Not only get to hold Bonnie, I also got to hold Lavender. I remember holding Lavender when she arrived. This is Lavender today. I think it's the smiles and the hope of the children, whether they're in Sunday school or you're outside working, that really lifts your spirits. Here's Josh. Baba Joshua! And he would reach up, and like most of the kids, they would all had one word that they would say, me, pick up me, pick me up, hold me. Me they knew. I have one picture of Josh the day I was sitting in a truck leaving to come back to Pittsford. That forms a memory for you. A memory of these children, so wonderful with needs. On the left is Ayub. Ayub's got new shoes. Don Gotti and I took a walk through the airport. We actually flew from here to Detroit, Detroit to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Nairobi, Nairobi to Eldoret, Eldoret to Kitale. It's about a 38-hour trip. Our international flight flew out of Detroit. We got to Detroit, and we had a little time before our plane left, and so we walked through the airport. There was a store there that had Crocs, these rubber kind of vinyl shoes. I was wearing a pair of Crocs. Why? Because it's muddy at this time of year in Kenya, and there's no metal parts in Crocs, so you can walk right through those metal detectors not having to worry about the shoes that you got on. The woman looked at me and she says, oh, you're wearing Crocs. I guess they don't have any to sell yet. I said, no, don't, but I like the Crocs that you have in here. What brings you to Detroit? I said, well, we're on our way to Kenya. We're going to work on an orphanage there, and there are a lot of children, and most all the children wear Crocs. They do? Oh, yeah. Maybe they would need one of these. And so she reached over and she took off a pair of Crocs, $48.95, and gave them to me and said, take these to a child. So Ayub got the Batman Crocs. The shoes are so prized that when they go to church, the kids line all their shoes outside. Their names are carved into the back of the shoes. When we flew home back to Pittsford, our plane came back through Detroit. We ended up on Concourse A, but the Crocs store for the shoes is on Concourse C. So I said, I think I might have enough time if I really run. So I ran downstairs underneath the flight deck, over eventually to Concourse A or C, and found my way to the Crocs store and pulled out my phone on which I had a picture of Ayub. And the woman who ran the store said, no one has ever come back to show me a picture of a gift of shoes before. It's really the children that's the reason we go. More importantly, actually, than the buildings we build. I thought you'd like to know exactly what does it look like most of Kenya. You've seen some pictures of the orphanage. This picture is from our hotel in Nairobi. Here are some scenes for what you travel along as you go to Nairobi toward Kitale. The communities sort of look like this. Yes, there are churches and places to shop. And there's wildlife. Sheep. Best time to go see the animals on Masai Mara is to go at sunrise and watch the animals wake up, including the cheetahs, God's sense of humor, warthogs, different kinds of deer and vultures. Maybe if you look closely, you'll see the leopard climbing down out of the tree, thousands of wildebeest in migration, zebras, red-crested cranes, a pride of lions, and the one predator of lions, right? The ostrich. The hind legs of an ostrich are so powerful they can kill lion. But as wonderful as that is, the most valuable part of what mission happens is really the lives of the children. This is a mission that you do. Not all of you can go to Kenya, or to Mozambique, or to Malawi, or to Peru, or many of the other places we go, like some of our senior highs will go to Jamaica next year. But we want to be a light, not just to Pittsford and Rochester, but to the world. Isn't that what the scriptures tell us? And you have been. Your giving and your mission make all of this possible. And on behalf of these children, I want to say thank you for all that you do for them. You are a blessing